You have probably heard of and maybe even read the book Atomic Habits. It's a bestseller with more than 20 million copies sold, and it's been translated into 60 languages. It's very accessible, and this time of year, people are talking a lot about it. Well, what I want to do today is I want to apply Atomic Habits to writing. You know, I say all the time, if you want to write your book this year, you can do it in 500 words a day. Just write 500 words a day until your manuscript is done, which sounds easy, but that kind of writing consistency isn't easy. But if you apply the principles of Atomic Habits, it will be a lot easier. If you are one of the few people that hasn't yet read Atomic Habits, get your hands on a copy of it this week. The information in there is phenomenal, and there's a reason that it is a bestseller. What I want to do today is I want to apply James Clear's ideas to writing. As you probably know, I am a licensed professional counselor, and in the world of counseling, it's all about change, how to make things different, to make things less painful, to make our future life better than our present life feels. Well, I have also been a college professor, and one of my favorite classes to teach was counseling theories, really looking at the psychological theories and how they perceive this human behavior change. Now, when I would teach the class, I would teach 12 main theories, but underneath those main theories, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other theories. But they mostly boil down to this one idea. How you help a person change is by either changing their thoughts or their behaviors or their feelings, or possibly some mix of those, but usually focusing on one of those as the change agent. So I thought that for the next 3 videos, I would do a series on looking at writing and developing these kind of New Year's skills and these things that we want so that we can be able to write a book through the lens of action, cognitions, and emotions. Well, this video is going to look at behavior. And if you have a very specific behavior that you want to change, then using behavioral strategies can be highly effective. Schools use them, life coaches use them. A lot of people that are looking at habit change are talking about behaviors. So for this video, let's look at the behavior of writing 500 words every day. Now, if you are looking at a behavior, the best way to approach changing the behavior is to be very aware of the ABCs. So the A is the antecedent. So what happens before that behavior? In the case of writing, we might think about what is our little startup routine that we do very quickly that immediately puts us in the mode of writing. The B is the behavior itself, so the actual writing of 500 words. What are the things that we can do that will enhance when that behavior occurs and decrease anything that would keep that behavior from happening? And the C is the consequence. So after the behavior is completed, what happens as a result of that? So we want to add positive reinforcements to increase the likelihood of the behavior, or we might want to be really aware of negative reinforcements that may decrease the likelihood of the behavior. So when we're talking about writing 500 words, if you get a charge out of logging your words and watching your word count rise like I do, that is a consequence of the behavior that increases the likelihood of the behavior. If whenever you are done writing, you immediately sigh and say, "Oh, thank goodness that's over," that may be a negative reinforcement that decreases the likelihood that you'll engage in that behavior again. So that's a quick summary of behavioral approaches to writing. Now let's transition to what James Clear has to say about it. So today I want to focus in on actions. And honestly, I don't need to give you this information because James Clear has already put it together so well in a book. If you are really interested in this, you might also look at Charles Duhigg's book on the power of habit. It is also looking at how to change behaviors as a way to change your life. Well, let me introduce myself. I am Denis'Thomas. I'm the author of a dozen books, and I've written more than 2 million words using these principles. And I think they're going to help you too. So let's get into the book, Atomic Habits, and applying it to writers. Well, his book has 20 chapters of goodness. And he says that there are 4 laws to behavior change. And if you do the opposite, the inverse of these laws, then you will decrease behaviors. So if there's habits you want to break, you would want to do the opposite of this. For our purposes today, we're going to talk about things that increase the likelihood that you will write 500 words each day. So his first law is to make it obvious. This is what he calls the cue. So on this channel, when I'm talking about deciding where and when you are writing, that is the making it obvious. That the location sets the tone and makes it obvious that now is the time for you to write. He talks about designing your environment. If you write on a laptop, have your laptop charged and ready to go. And until it's a habit, maybe you need some visual cues to remind you. So put that Post-it note in the bathroom where you visit first thing in the morning to remind you to go write next if you want to be a morning writer. So right now, think about the cues in your environment that will make it easier for you to write 500 words in your next writing session. Now, also, think about the inverse of that. Are there certain cues or things in your environment that actually make it harder for you to complete that habit? If your plan is to write at a coffee shop, but writing at a coffee shop requires you to get up 30 minutes earlier, to drive 15 minutes out of your way, and to be there at a time when it's really busy and possibly makes you late for work, maybe that kind of a cue, creating that kind of an environment, is actually going to make it harder for you to write because you're likely to not do that. And that is the cue. Make it obvious. So here's a quote. He says, "Every habit should have a home." Does your writing habit have a home? So the second law of behavior change that James Clear outlines in Atomic Habits is make it attractive. You want this to be a habit that is appealing to you. So what kind of things can you do that will enhance that? One of my favorite strategies that he outlines in the book is a concept that he calls temptation bundling. And it's this idea that you pair the habit that you are trying to cultivate with something that you already enjoy. So as you are thinking about your next writing session and getting your next 500 words written, how can you pair the act of writing with things that you enjoy? Now, I suggest using your 5 senses. This could be things like including motivational phrases in your writing environment, or maybe even buying something like a really cute laptop cover that gets you excited about opening your laptop to write, if that's the device you write on. You might also think about your sense of smell. So you might want to incorporate a candle or some incense. And some writers have found it helpful to have a specific scent associated with each manuscript. So if you're writing a winter novel, maybe you have a pine scent. If you're writing a spring novel, maybe you have a lavender scent. Or maybe there's a scent that ties in with the topic of your book. Or maybe they're not related at all, but that smell then becomes tied to writing your manuscript. Other people really just like to keep their scents very consistent so that that scent always means writing. It's up to you, but it might be something that you want to include. So you also might want to think about your sense of taste. Now, I always have coffee next to me. That is for the flavor, but it also includes the sense of smell as well. You might have a piece of chocolate, really good quality chocolate, that you eat a bite of after you have written for the day, and that becomes your reward. Maybe you want to include the sense of hearing and listen to a playlist. I find that focus music is incredibly helpful to me in my writing. It's why I do the Write With Me videos on the weekends, simply to give me some background to listen to that just helps me know this is writing time and helps me dig into that and get focused faster. You might also include textures that are appealing to you. It doesn't matter what you include around here. It'll be unique to you and the things that you appreciate and enjoy, but include things that you like around the behavior of writing, and you're more likely to do it. Another point that he made in the book that I found really helpful is that we actually get our dopamine spike, that feel-good spike, from the anticipation of the reward of doing the behavior more than actually completing the behavior. So anticipating the reward is important to include in increasing the likelihood of the behavior of writing 500 words a day. What is it that you are anticipating as a result of having written? And another way that you might want to make your writing attractive is to include some sort of a social group around your writing. Maybe become part of a writer's group, or join an online writing club, or somehow incorporate other people in your writing. Even if you're not able to be part of that group on every writing session, by being part of that group at all, you will increase the likelihood that you will do your writing. It's kind of some built-in accountability because you have people around you who also value daily writing. And here's another quote from James Clear. He says, "The cause of your habits is actually the prediction that precedes them." So what are you predicting from your writing? The cause, or the antecedent of the habit, is the prediction of the feeling you get from doing it. What you really want is the feeling. You think that you want to write a book and that the book is the big reward, but what is actually the reward is having written the book and that feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of having finished a goal, that feeling of being an expert in your field. Whatever that feeling is, your anticipation of that feeling is what's really motivating you to write. So the third law that James Clear outlines in his book is to make it easy. So this is the response. First, he talked about the cues, then he talked about the craving, making it attractive, and now we're talking about the response. You may be spending a lot of time kind of fighting with your willpower, but the reality, according to his book, is that we're all wired to be lazy. We're all looking for the path of least resistance. We're all looking for the simplest way to get something done. So instead of fighting that and trying to make things more complicated, just make it easy. What are some things that you could do that would make your writing habit easy for you? So easy that getting started would be almost effortless. So in the book, he also talks about reducing friction. So again, what are the things that you could do that would make your writing habit easy? Or think about the inverse. What are things around your writing habit that are actually making it harder for you to write? And how can you change those so that it's easier? And in the book, he also talks about the gateway habit that starts the chain for your writing habit. So writing 500 words is actually kind of a big habit because it takes about 30 minutes. But what is the very first thing in the chain of actions that gets you writing? Is it sitting down at your desk. Or maybe it happens before that when you go get your coffee. Or maybe it happens before that. Think about your specific writing habit. When you write, what is the very first thing in the chain of actions that gets you writing? For me, I think it is putting the coffee cup down on my desk. That is when I know I am writing. The next thing that I do usually is to open my laptop and then to find my document. Unless I've made it easy and the night before I have already opened the document, so it's the first thing that I will see. And by doing those gateway habits, it ensures that I'm going to get in my manuscript and write my 500 words. So what would make it easy for you? All right, here's another quote for you. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. And that brings us to the fourth law of behavior change, and that is make it satisfying. This is the reward phase. So you've had the cue, the craving, the response, and now this is the reward. You want to be really intentional about making your writing habit rewarding. Make it satisfying. If you are writing for the reward of publishing your book, well, that is too far away. If you are writing for the reward of finishing chapter 1, well, even that is too far away. You need an immediate reward. Now, I have said many times, but the word count log works to do that for me. I get a charge as I watch my words add up. I get a charge out of knowing I hit 500 words, or even better, I exceeded 500 words today. And for me, that's really rewarding. Maybe for you, it's an X on a calendar for every day that you write. Or perhaps it's a sticker in your planner. Or maybe it's a measurement on a thermometer, a visual marker of how your word count is growing. Whatever works for you is great, but it needs to have a little piece of it that happens with every writing session. He says that what you measure guides your behavior. So are you measuring whether you have done your 500 words or not? If you don't have any sort of a system set up for measuring how much you write each day, it is likely that you are missing a big piece of this reward. And here's another gold star from the book. He talks about how incentives may get you to start writing, but your identity is what keeps you writing. And I've talked about this on the channel before. A really pivotal point in my writing career was when I actually out loud had to say, I am a writer. Can you say that? Writers write. Are you writing? Do you have the identity of a writer? That is a powerful piece of this reward, because if I am a writer, well, of course I write. And every time I write, I reinforce that I am a writer. And this might be my favorite quote of all from the book. He says, the goal is not to write a book, but to become a writer. I think one of the reasons that's my favorite quote is because it reminds me that not only is he an expert at creating habits, creating behavior changes to get you what you want, but James Clear is a writer as well. He's written this book. He's written newsletters for years. I mean, he's a prolific writer. So maybe he knows something about developing the habit of writing consistently. As we're talking about rewards, if you get a reward every single time you do something, it becomes less rewarding. But if you get rewards at intervals, then it becomes more rewarding. And if those intervals are variable, and especially if they're not predictable, those are the best kind for reinforcing your behavior and making it harder for that behavior to stop. So if you want to write consistently, maybe you develop some sort of a system to give you variable rewards. Maybe you roll a dice, and on that dice, each of the 6 numbers, or however many numbers happen to be on your dice, is a reward that you get. Keep it small, keep it simple. There's no reason your reward system should ever get complicated and thus a detraction from the act of writing. But if you have variable rewards like that, maybe that will keep you writing. And the last tidbit from his book that I want to talk about is to never miss 2 days in a row. If you want to keep the habit consistent, you're going to miss sometimes. And if you miss one day, that's okay. But don't ever let yourself miss 2 days in a row, because as soon as you do that, you may be starting a new habit, and that new habit may be not writing. So here's my summary of the book Atomic Habits, which I really encourage you to read for yourself if you haven't already. First, if you want the identity of a writer, then write. Write 500 words every day. Second, think about your cue. Where do you write? When do you write? What does your environment look like for writing? How can you design that environment to cue you to write? Third, craving. What do you want to feel? What do you anticipate will happen if you do this daily writing? And who is in your group? Who are your writer people? And do you have access to them? Next, think about your response to writing. Do you have a reward? Do you have something that is inherently rewarding about writing for you? Are there external things that you can set up that will promote the habit? Consequences that increase the likelihood that you will write? Or are there things in your environment that are consequences that actually decrease the likelihood that you write? Consider what those rewards are and make sure that you've tailored them to increase your writing habit. And I am sure you have heard this quote before, because it's probably one of his most quoted phrases. And that is this: James Clear says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And you can develop your writing system by looking at these 4 laws of behavior change. Well, if you like reviews like this one, you may also like my book review on Cal Newport's Slow Productivity. That video's right over here.